So I'm very delighted to be here and to participate in this really extraordinary book that can be read on so many different levels. Today we'll be focusing on the issue of women in Mandate Palestine, forging their own identities. But the book also has extraordinary historical material about what life was like in Mandate Palestine, the blow-by-blow descriptions of what it was like to get to Mandate Palestine in the late 19th century, all of which is to say this is a wonderful book, and I am delighted to be part of this. So, Robert, before we get into the substance of our conversation, which, as I mentioned, is the enduring challenges faced by women in shaping their identities, I have an aside question. After a long and successful career as an artist, as Howard told us, what made you shift your focus to writing a novel?
Well, after 45 years of solitude in my studio from 9 every morning till 2 every afternoon, often 7 days a week, I thought I'd take a break and spend 12 years of solitude in front of my computer. Kevin Roach, the architect, said, "You're not alive unless your mind is active." For me, it's always been a question of where is my mind active? Where am I engaged? Where am I happy getting up in the morning, going to work, and looking forward to each day, often 7 days a week? And I found that in researching the book.
Did you have regrets that your mother wasn't still alive so you could ask her questions?
Yes, of course. There are a million questions I would have loved to have asked her. There were the million questions she would have loved not to answer. I think it's unclear to me how much more I would have been able to bring to the book had she still been alive while I was working on it. She always said she wanted her story told, but her sense of her story being told is of her coming to this country, marrying my father, forming a successful middle-class life, being able to bring children into a non-stressed kind of a world.
Talk to us a little bit about the hurdles you had to overcome in writing this novel.
Well, the novel was inspired by a stash of letters I found in my mother's belongings after she died, and they were from Reuven. These were very passionate letters. They engaged in postal sex, really, while they were apart to stay close to one another. So my mother certainly would not have been happy with that aspect of the book, I'm sure. She saved the letters. I take that to mean she wanted them preserved and she wanted her story told. And my sense is if they had the courage to live the life that they lived, I should have the courage to write the kind of a book that reflects it. Lots of difficulties of getting a translation. The Hebrew is not the same Hebrew that people who learned Hebrew in this country read easily. So I had to find basically an Israeli to translate it. And it took a while researching the histories there. But some of the really interesting aspects were in terms of uncovering family documents and finding out what was there is the different stories that came down along the male line and along the female line. When my great-grandparents first had children, the female story was that they had 3 sons, all of whom died of circumcision infections. The male story is they had 2 daughters who died of unknown circumstances. So make of that what you will. You'll see when and if you read the book how I navigated that, how I altered that. Another very interesting one along those lines is the story of my great-grandmother, who both male and females agree was spirited out of Eastern Europe because a nobleman, which I take to mean a non-Jew, was interested in her and they wanted to get her out of the country quickly. So they took her to the Holy Land and to what was then just an outpost in the swamps, Petah Tikva. It's a big city today, and married her off to the village Joffe, the kosher butcher, who was 30 years older than her, perhaps more. So she played in the yard with his daughters. And each time she had a child, she ran away back to her parents who were in Jerusalem, and they couldn't afford to keep her. So they sent her back to him in Petah Tikva. The male story is that he and she met at the Western Wall. They fell madly in love right away, love at first sight, and lived happily. Another great difficulty for me was writing about my mother's sex life. And this is an interesting one because, I've discussed this with friends, and women tend not to have as much trouble thinking about their mother's sex life as men do. For me, it was a hurdle, particularly with these very graphic letters that are really sexually explicit in ways. So that was kind of a hard thing to overcome. I found myself resenting Reuven, and I've come to characterize that as prenatal edible resentments. It's funny, I'm defensive. I was defensive of her, and I thought I was kind of at times being unfair of him while writing and had to check myself. Because he was struggling also. He was having a hard time. But I sided with her, understandably, perhaps justifiably.
So we should clarify for the audience that Robert had access to the letters that Reuven wrote his mother, Zipporah. He did not have access to the letters she wrote back, which leads me to the question, how much is made up in the novel and how much actually happened?
It's really a mix. In the earlier books, I had very little to go by. I knew, for example, that the family boarded a boat to take them to the Holy Land. They left in the early 1880s. That was before the pogroms were happening. They did this wholly for religious reasons. They wanted to follow a religious course. Yosef Siv, my great-grandfather, was hoping to have his bar mitzvah in Jerusalem when they set out. But all I knew is they boarded a ship to go, a boat, not a ship. So they could have taken any one of numerous routes. It might have even been an inland waterway that took them someplace south. That was the quickest way to get down there, through the Black Sea. Or more commonly through the Baltic and then cutting across somewhere in Germany, present what is the German Empire, or France, which were very anti-Semitic areas. I mean, this was a dangerous undertaking for them to do. So I had to invent the entire trip. I did know that after all the struggles of getting there, when they finally arrived in Ottoman Palestine, they didn't have enough money to bribe the border people to let them into Jerusalem. So they had to go to Cyprus and work in Cyprus for 2 years, building roads for the British. But aside from those broad things, it's all fiction, really. When we get into the later, subsequent parts of the book, I did have the letters. I did have different family notes and things that told me things. So in those instances, they're pretty accurate and pretty well followed course. But, dealing with letters Reuben is sending, it doesn't tell the whole story. There's a wide background of what's going on and what, people faced. I mean, there are a lot of surprises for me. When my mother came to this country and I looked at the date, she arrived the week of the 29 crash. I mean, here's a single woman from Palestine coming to a country at that point, which is also quite anti-Semitic, and trying to find work. Incredible struggles there. And you don't really get that from Reuben's letters.
In the novel, you describe rather strange, certainly to modern readers, customs, especially about newborn boys being given to neighbors to raise. Can you describe that? Did it really happen in your family?
What do you find strange about that? From my research, what I found many instances of Jewish families giving children to neighbors to raise, but it's orphans generally, or for financial need. To do it for superstitious reasons, as this was done. I haven't found other examples, but my mother and another aunt, told me and a cousin the same story independently of to ward off the evil after the early children died of circumcision infections. When they had another son, the issue was, is he going to live or not? And that whole episode that I got into is fiction, really, but I knew the broad outline of what went on there. And the story that I had was that to ward off the evil spirits, she dressed him like a girl, which wasn't unusual. I have family photos of uncles and aunts, and my Uncle Morris is dressed as a girl, as a little boy. To ward off the evil spirit, she was told, presumably, to let neighbors raise him. And presumably she didn't kiss him until his 13th birthday, his bar mitzvah, when he was an adult. So, it's unique to my family, perhaps, or perhaps it's more common and just not out there in the literature. Yeah, Jews are very superstitious, or can be very superstitious. One of the ones I came across in my own work, in the Baltic journey, I have one of the young children on the boat dying. Immigrant boats were just packed and disease and so on, rampant. And they have to go ashore to bury him. For Jews, burial at sea is unacceptable. And part of the reasoning of that, or the major reasoning of that, is when the Messiah comes, presumably all of us here who are Jewish will, as well as everyone in the past who has lived, will go through tunnels and caves and find their way to Jerusalem for the Messiah's presence. And in burials, they found many people buried with sticks in their hands or little shovels in their hands in order for them to dig their way to Jerusalem. But there are lots of other strange superstitions, like when you hear something good or evil, spitting 3 times, both for good and for evil, which is strange. You would think it would be one or the other, but they balance out in some strange way. Pulling your ear when sneezing. Some argue you should pull the right ear. Some argue you should pull the left ear. It's argued by some you should pull both ears. Take your pick. Closing religious books when they're open, so when you go away from them, so evil spirits can't get in. Not naming children after the living. And amulets, which plays a big part in the Rabbi's Suitcase, but the power of amulets, and people carried them with them when they traveled for good luck. They had them and posted in their houses for good luck.
Can you discuss some of the ways young, smart, ambitious women like your mother, Zipporah, born in the Jerusalem Orthodox community during the early 20th century, how might she have felt constrained?
Yeah, my mother was up against incredible odds. It was a man's world that she was living in. Men dominated the family. Women were not allowed to get much of an education beyond what was needed to raise a family and keep a household. I did come across, my mother saved her report cards, some of them. I have a 3rd grade report card. For those of you who read Hebrew, girls were raised to be housekeepers. They learned enough arithmetic to take care of the house. They learned to read enough for prayer and religious studies, but nothing much broader than that. So, and there was no women's movement at the time. So, she was out there on her own. One of the stories she told, which I always found very, very memorable, was occasionally they'd have a chicken to eat, and they would cut it up into the exact number of people that were in the family. And sometimes my grandfather would come home with a friend from shul for dinner. And my mother, as the eldest, was instructed when the chicken came around to say, "No, thank you, I don't like chicken." So there would be enough pieces of chicken for the whole family. But women weren't allowed out into the world, have ambitions outside of the family, or worst of all, show or express sexual desire.
Reuben saw himself as a very modern 20th century man, someone who wasn't bound by old world ways in his relationship with Zipporah. But this doesn't seem to have been entirely the case as their relationship progressed. Can you explain some of the ways Zipporah felt both attracted to and then held back by Reuben's attitudes toward women?
He was her freedom from her family. I mean, she was locked in. She was the eldest of 7 children. She was a mother. Her mother had terrible pregnancies. She was in bed with pains. Every 2 years, she had another kid. And my mother had to really raise the family, and that was what her future was, what she was cut out for. And Reuben comes in. Here's this guy who was educated in a high-class yeshiva in Lithuania, Pavnes, and he sort of knew the world, and he introduced the world here. I mean, she told me of going with him to see an opera. I think it was Aida in Hebrew. He took her to plays in the new Hebrew University that Albert Einstein had just opened while they were there. This was a chance for her to live a life that she could see the world, she could travel, she could read, she could learn to write. And Reuben saw himself very much as a 20th century man, but, his letters kind of belie that. For example, she comes here, as I mentioned, the Depression just began. Finding work as a woman anyway was impossible. As a Jewish woman, it was doubly impossible. She was staying with an uncle and aunt, and the uncle wouldn't let her didn't want her to go out on her own. I mean, it was like still being at home in some way. And she had to really navigate this, and finally found a job working for a jeweler in Brooklyn through a connection she had met on the boat while she was traveling to Palestine, to this country, and wrote to him finally to say, that I found work. And she was afraid. And she wrote to him without mentioning her fears and discomfort. She assured him that her boss, as Americans called them, treated her very respectfully. His response took her by surprise, and here I'm quoting straight from his letter. Here you are, a shop girl. This naturally will lead to moonlighting, to the necessity to subjugate yourself to any superior, to a complete abandonment of principles. From here to the streets, the distance is not great. Her stomach clenched as she read. If you continue pursuing such jobs, I must tell you in no uncertain words, I can never marry. When she finally finds a job in Brooklyn in an orphanage, a Jewish orphanage, and she's basically splitting what she's earning between her family, who has come over, and sending him half to support him in Paris while he's studying at the Sorbonne before they get married. She decides that she really would like to do some studying on her own and enroll in night school to learn how to write. She's ambitious and wants to be a writer, and she does write some interesting plays. When Zipporah told Reuven that she was again thinking about enrolling in night school, he discouraged her. Again, I'm quoting from his letter. I know several female students that have graduated and how insignificant they are compared to you. All their scientific pretensions only evoke disgust, since they lack the main quality that turns a woman into an ideal and gives her the power to dominate men. They lack the truth you possess. Don't think that receiving a university diploma will make you dearer to me. You are dear to me as you are. Read what you can. So that's quite an obstacle. This is the man who is her ticket to a fuller life. And this is his response to her wanting to go out there and try and do something on her own.
You portray your mother having had an abortion. How did you find out about that?
Well, I only had Reuven's letters, and he never says abortion. And I almost had the sense that he foresaw his future and didn't want that written there. Just a hunch. I could be wrong. But he arrives in Strasbourg, and there's a letter waiting for him in which she, I think, tells him that she's pregnant and so on, but he refers to her illness, and clearly she's very ill. Later on, he writes a letter. He reminisced about his hesitation over wearing a condom during the time together in his room. Quote, how alien it seemed to my naked chest when my naked chest touched your exposed breasts. I recall the look in your eyes, and I asked you about the need for a condom. You were silent. I saw your breasts heaving with impatience, your legs spreading, eager to feel the contact with my hardening, probing member, finding its way through the titillating moisture into the holy of holies. I understood that you too regarded the condom as profane and tore it off. So any artificial barrier between us seemed sacrilegious. And the terminology is very interesting because he's using the religious terminology that forbids this behavior.
How common do you think abortion was in Mandate Palestine?
It was very common. It was illegal, strictly illegal, except to save the mother's life. I guess all of you must know when a Jewish fetus is deemed viable. I see puzzled faces. when it graduates from medical school. Yeah, it was done very extensively underground, and there were many infections, many people posing as qualified people who did perform.
Well, today it's a different story. Today abortion is legal in Israel. I mean, one has to go through a committee of a social worker, maybe 2 doctors, but the committees are mainly pro forma. Most women who want an abortion in Israel today are able to get one. Not everybody, but most. Jewish law, in some cases, mandates abortion. I mean, abortions are absolutely essential, are absolutely demanded to save a woman's life. In fact, if I can digress for 1 second into the post-Dobbs world, the Supreme Court ruling that overturned Roe, when different states started suing to restore it, some of those who joined were Jewish women who said, "You are violating my Jewish right. I need to live out my religion's demands. I need to be able to have access to an abortion." But let me just say that I am very impressed, as someone who studies abortion, I am very impressed by how realistically you wrote about it. An abortion would have taken place in that era. Anyway, well, let's stop here.